Greetings, and welcome to episode 5 of this infection-free zone playthrough in Mogadishu, Somalia. If you're new here, I recommend watching this series from the very beginning. The playlist for this can be found on my channel page. If not, and you're a returning viewer, please leave a like and comment on what you think of the series, and subscribe if you feel inclined. And with that, let's return to Mogadishu, Somalia.
Hostile group incoming. We're on the move. Let's do it. We're on the move.
Another day, and another set of raiders' bodies on the ground.
On my way.
Another day, another threat of a rampaging swarm, the overpowering scent of death in the air, makeshift graves piled 6 deep with the bodies of the infected. But in and amongst it, delicate, fragile hope. This was what was coming to be known as the soundtrack of Mogadishu today. It's a feeling echoed as we pry the weapons from the bodies of the last trio of overly ambitious raiders who tried their luck. But those raiders, they weren't our biggest threat. Right now, that was hunger.
Technology researched.
It was still an ever-present threat. Some might argue it's a good problem to have, having a surplus of manpower. But the zone would march, fight, and survive on its stomach alone. It was no good to us empty. Space for food production is limited, so I ordered the research team to look into ways to streamline what we have. Doing more with less, I appreciate, might feel like a cop-out, but it could at least buy me some time to reform Jitka more permanently. But with citizens tucked up in bed, and a full moon up again over the skyline, we would have another day of execution from the infected. So, in preparation for our potential assault on the laboratory, I ordered the requisition of another compact car in the neighbouring district. If these were targeted or damaged en route to or from outside of our operating range of the radio, at least the squad driving could make their way on foot, and we wouldn't lose a more valuable fuel truck or a loot-carrying vehicle. After all, faced with the choice of ditching what I could only describe as a glorified tin can with wheels and saving their own lives, versus abandoning a car full of essential equipment and material, my squad's lives would need to come first, every single time. And by now, the citizens were becoming restless for some action and some progress. We were fortunate that we hadn't had any infected turning lately, either in their homes or in the hospital wards. Our cautionary literature and vigilance, at least for now, was paying off. But those citizens still wanted to see it. They wanted to see results towards that vaccine. I knew more than anybody that our time was running out, but I was still short a few essential pieces of equipment, without which my squads remained dangerously exposed.
Chief, I've been looking around more recently, and I'm thinking everything's turning green, pure. We're not the masters of this world anymore.
What do you mean by that?
Branches sticking out of windows and roots breaking through, as if the forest itself has come to reclaim the land. And all these animals around downtown, it's their world now. And the infected.
We will reclaim it.
I suppose it was expected that this would happen. Nothing, after all, escapes the inevitable march of time and nature. If Mogadishu, Somalia, however, were abandoned today, like the area around our zone, what kind of plants would ultimately overwhelm the city in such a way? Well, after 5 to 10 years, A very likely culprit would be the neem tree, or the Azadirachta indica. Introduced from India several decades ago, these are often planted in the grounds of Mogadishu's public buildings, such as hospitals and public courtyards. By now their branches would be pushing through concrete and the second or third story windows, slowly tearing apart what took mankind centuries to build. And these men would be walking over wild grass and certain figs, and watching for the thorns of the Acacia nilotica, of course the gum arabic tree, which by this point in the city being abandoned would be upwards of 5 to 10 metres in height, a very hardy and difficult species of tree to eradicate. This would have no problems forcing its way up through sidewalks and taking down fences. It really does make you wonder, are we humans really the problem? Would we, if we disappeared simply overnight, be forgotten, the sands of time, ready for another species to rule over Earth in our place? But putting aside being swallowed by flora and fauna, we have a more immediate threat to our existence, the 12th Swarm. It split itself up, ambushing a group of nearby raiders before rushing towards the zone from the south this time. Defenders scramble to reposition, and fingers tremble on triggers once again.
Ready for action. Operator. Waiting orders. Roger. Ready for action. We're on the move. Infected incoming.
Our building is under attack.
Going there. We're on the move. Going there. On my way. On my way. Busting support!
We're on the hold much longer. They got inside.
Losing men!
True disaster had been seconds away. An unusually aggressive alpha hadn't yielded to gunfire, noise or anything in between. Determined to tear his way into the Gurigii Badbaado, he shattered the brick lining and tore the door off the hinges and destroyed the exterior wall, taking it cleanly down. Terrified men, women and children fled the building in just their nightclothes and underwear, trying to avoid being hit by stray gunfire. Bullets narrowly avoid fleeing innocents, fists fly and terror reigns. One brave squad stepped up to distract the brute and pull him away. It worked, but they paid a heavy price. One solitary punch, a crack of bone and sinew, and one hardened soldier falls dead on the spot. It was a steep price, but their bravery saved every last innocent soul. The rest of them ran to the headquarters to take up refuge for the siege for the rest of the night. Naturally, repairs to the housing unit were number one priority. We would make sure that brave soldier was afforded the funeral and honours he really deserved. For their inhuman courage under pressure, I'd give them all a damn medal for what they did. To come out by morning and find our defences breached would be a jarring experience. To see a human corpse among the dead, especially one of the toughest men you ever knew, made starting work ever more muted and sullen, being served a reminder that Mogadishu could brutally punish our mistakes, a reminder that even the strongest fortress had a weakness, a reminder that we need to bolster it further.
We bumped into a wandering group.
Ask them to join us.
While I admit we had enough medical supplies to take care of the 6 survivors, even if my radio did miss the latter, It wouldn't exactly be reassuring for our new arrivals to see a building half torn down, but we needed every able body, even if it did mean an additional mouth to feed. Sadly, as well, tonight, repairs had not yet been finished on the housing block, forcing those displaced citizens to have to bed down in their makeshift spots throughout the HQ. But, being honest, I'd rather share my personal radio room with 3 others than leave them out on the bloodied pavement to the mercy of the city.
Research complete.
And with that, the immediate problem of cooking was at least somewhat alleviated. Mass communal pots, large-scale ovens, and an efficient cook line made for a much more rapid deployment of food. But it wasn't a case of problem solved. The hunger wasn't gone. More like a case of problem deferred. For now, I turned to the Great Forge, or as we had named it, the Gupta Gashaman, known as the Armoured Place in Somali. These first sets of the finest plate mail were now ready for action, and the pristine steel was now being proudly worn by one of our elite squads. They were now the true embodiment of the new Daroish, fighting back against the relentless threat of the infected. Now that we were ready for the assault, I earmarked them the compact car and ordered them to take medical supplies and additional fuel. And finally, after too much stalling, I ordered an assault against the research facility. If anyone could get access to it, it would be these guys. I ordered them to approach the lab with extreme caution and to give me a sitrep before attempting a breach. No matter what, this wasn't going to be pretty.
Our people are starving.
Yet, it seems I just cannot escape the hunger problem. As I fight one front of this relentless war, another one fights back again. I realised that the number of people who were tragically forced to skip a meal were in the very small minority of citizens, but that is no excuse. But it's not easily resolvable, other than building more cookhouses, of which Jidka just simply couldn't sustain anymore. My only resolution at this moment was to cling to the hope that the streamlined kitchens can keep the store stocked come tomorrow. Otherwise, we might have to mass scavenge again. As I'm fielding the report from the zone spokesperson, my radio crackles into life. In my haste, I manage to scramble the first communication.
On my way. Infected inside!
We have to get it now. Get inside.
And now we wait and hold our breath.
Just bring whatever you...
Ready for action. Requesting support! Swarm is nearby! Man the stations! We're inside. Infected cleared, case retrieved. This place looks like it's been abandoned for years. Wait a second. Found what? Oh, God. Alright, they definitely did something here. There are operating tables and steel cages. Oh, the smell. These people are still inside. The bodies. What the hell is this place?
Just get what we need and leave as soon as possible.
We will, but I'm thinking, should we take a look inside the case? I know Dr. Miller asked us not to, but now, looking at this place, I really don't know if we can trust these guys.
No. The risk of damaging the contents is too great.
All right, the faster we're out of here, the better. Get the case to dock.
I ordered the squad to put the spare petrol to good use and go straight to Dr. Miller. Part of me wanted to be shocked at what they found in there, The human and moral part of me, that is. But in a world that's collapsing like this one, torn apart by war, bombs and madness, it hardly surprised me that the rule of ethics was torn up in favour of results. But it probably shocked me more at just how far they'd strayed from it. After seeing those twisted hulks of flesh that used to be people in those cases and on the operating tables, I'd rather never know what was in that case. Not now, not ever. All I wanted to think about, at least, is what use it would be to the humans who are still alive, including the citizens that I'm bound to protect.
Receive it.
You're back. Did you retrieve the case?
Yes, my people will give it to you.
Good. Thank you. You have no idea how much it means.
What's in the case?
The proof that our research bears fruit. Good scientists gave their lives for these samples.
Need anything else?
Actually, yes. Our vaccine reached a testing phase during the outbreak, but we could not continue.
What happened?
Our testing facility went down, and now we have to run the tests on our own. We need samples of the infected to isolate the mutated virus.
What kind of samples?
We need some freshly harvested organs from an alpha infected. If you kill it as close to our lab as possible, you will be able to deliver them fast enough.
You want us to cut up alpha infected right after we kill it? Why do you even need its organs?
The way alphas grow and react to the virus is unprecedented. There must be something abnormal about their DNA. The samples must be fresh so that we can observe the virus while it's still active.
Alright, I'll do this for you.
Excellent. Bring them to us as soon as you're done.
They're coming!
The thought of it alone made me want to throw up. The flesh of an alpha was tough, scaly and rigid as body armour. The mere thought of watching one of our medical team take a scalpel to that putrid mess after we'd ripped it apart with a few dozen 7.62s made me not want to eat for a week. I wanted to be angry, honestly. We'd just stormed a fortress of the infected that they abandoned, and now they wanted more? But I knew my anger would be a poor choice. We needed that vaccine fast. But the looks on the faces of my own researchers when I told them of the task were faces of utter horror. I don't know how they nominated the volunteers to carry out the deed, but if they flipped coins to decide the unlucky bastard to do it, I certainly wouldn't blame them. Hell, I probably would have done the same thing, truth be told. And if alphas were going to be a repeat occurrence, I didn't want a rerun of last night. 4 more healthy individuals are picked for a 10th fire team. I swore not to cut corners by using pistols, but it was all I had, and I would not be sending them into the streets. They were for zone defence only. They'd be safer and more deadly firing from the windows than dodging in the streets. And as well, now that we had cooking under our belt research-wise, my attention turns to new orders for the team. But for the first time in a long while, I find myself somewhat paralysed by choice, given the problems that we face. On the one hand, we needed to make our own guns, as the trader is often arriving without a rifle to his name. On the other, research towards infection treatment seemed to be the most logical choice. But then, with all this long-distance driving to and from the laboratory and elsewhere, our petrol supply would only take us so far. Not to mention the citizens are complaining of a lack of childcare within Jidka, and we can't let the next generation fall behind in a world as cruel as this one. I decide to leave the research team without orders for now. I needed to get this vaccine endeavour done first. So I leave them on standby for the arrival of the next Alpha, a task I sincerely dread, one I dread almost as much as hearing this.
There's nothing to eat.
I had expected the hunger problem to creep back up on me, but I hadn't expected it quite this soon. I'm forced to inspect the cookhouses myself. With several chefs ill and hospitalised, I quickly source replacements. Anyone with a single scrap of kitchen experience, ex-raiders, medics, hell, anyone who could even boil rice without killing someone. But we'd still have to scavenge for a stopgap until we could get another cookhouse running. One problem I can solve right now, however, was the commission of another kindergarten on the northeast end of Jidka. This ought to improve the spirits of our citizens fairly quickly, and I invest in a much more grandiose solution to some of our problems at least. And that was the commission of the zone's very first high-rise. 8 floors of prime living space, tailor-built from scratch. In some ways, it resembles Mogadishu's modernist past. These white-faceted shelters in the zone remind me of the Cross del Sud, built in 1933, or the Villa Somalia. Italian-built, I grant you, though undoubtedly built with pride. Even the now long-ruined 1972 Somali National Assembly, perhaps. But while I see the land being professionally flattened and prepared, a nagging thought occurs to me. This district, Shibis, was never meant for towers like this one. Building this close to the airport breaks every rule in the city's books. So I ask myself, is this a sign of renaissance like the icons of old? Or was this just simply an act of repetition, like the current unplanned and ill-suited towers, stacking hope on shaky ground? And speaking of shaky ground, the arrival of the 13th Swarm certainly brought just that, as guns are readied again.
Receiving. Ready for action. We're on the move. Receiving. Reporting. Let's do it. Another one incoming!
Our building's under attack. They're trying to get inside. Our building's under attack. Our building's under attack.
Large group of the infected incoming!
The infected are pillaging a building.
Now this was our chance. One isolated alpha making a charge, the swarm around him dispatched safely. The unlucky researcher is at the ready, scalpel in hand and face mask on.
Won't much longer.
We're on the move.
It was done. Our researcher had sprung into action, boots crunching, shredded bone and bile the moment the kill was confirmed, to perform his macabre work. I don't know how he did it, but kneeling in the reek of death, he hacked out the vile tissue in record timing. Time was short. Those organs could expire in a matter of hours at best. The squad grabs the nearest car and goes on my order. It had taken a few stray rounds, however, and the engine limped the moment it took off. But we had no time to swap. I told them nothing else mattered. They were to run over anyone who got in their way, infected, raider or survivor. Those parts had to get there without delay. As they drove into the distance, even I felt the need to cleanse my hands with bleach, and I'd not even gone within 100 feet of that beast.
Operator, status report. We managed to secure and deliver the samples to the scientists. I just hope it was worth our effort.
Good job.
We had done it. Even with the limping car, they'd made it. One grisly task successfully handled. I let the team scavenge near the safety of the lab. It's possible they could find a better car to get home with. For now, I could breathe a well-earned sigh of relief. We were one step closer to a cure, something the citizens would be elated to hear of.
Adaptation complete.
That did not, however, mean that I could start relaxing. There were still issues to address at home, and they were plentiful. But a new house for 23 is adapted, and the first workers start on the high-rise. Shovels hit dirt and hammers clatter on nails that we forge in our new Gupta Gashaman. With each strike of the steel, and every new brick laid in place, this ushered in a new, prosperous, and advanced new era for Jidka. And with it, a promise to our fallen squad members, our soldiers, and those that we couldn't save along the way, that their sacrifice was not in vain. And I must sneakily admit, a rooftop 8 stories above Jidka would be a virtually unbeatable vantage point against the ever-growing hordes that swirled around us in the shadows of Mogadishu. But while it may be a fair while until it's ready, it would still be a source of excitement for those witnessing its birth.
Chief, it makes me so proud to say that we've created a safe and prosperous place to live. Even if not everything is perfect, it fills everybody with hope that we may live normally one day. I think we should gather all our people together and rejoice.
We can't just rest on our laurels. There's work to do.
I would have loved to have afforded them the day of rest, but the food issue is running on a knife's edge. Shutting down production for a day or two would put us in a hunger spiral that could very well see deaths, and I don't have the surplus to spare. After all these men and women had achieved and overcome, it was a sad choice to deny them the chance to celebrate, but necessary. They would thank me a lot less if they started to die because of my choice to be the good time commander. I could see the disappointment almost everywhere. Kids who didn't know what a holiday was, and old men who had nothing to celebrate but simply being alive.
Ready for action. Going there. Receive. Another one incoming!
They're breaking into our building.
Receive it. Hostiles inbound!
The infected are pillaging a building.
Need more ammunition! No ammo! No ammo!
They're trying to get inside.
Ready for action. Receive it. Let's do it.
During the 14th swarm, and for the first time since the sieges began, one fire team heard something that no soldier ever wants to hear: the click of their weapon running dry. They fumble at chest pouches they already knew were empty, realising that they'd used every single round in their possession. With nothing but brick inlay and barricades between them and certain death, they had to hunker down and let the others take them out. Almost 300 infected corpses hit the road that night. Their faces are twisted in agony and bloodlust from their final moments of life, staring right up at the men who slayed them. The squads patrol the carnage for stragglers. While we had the advantage in numbers and the sheer weaponry that we could point in any one direction, I was acutely aware that there would come a time that a simple choke point like this would no longer suffice, that the numbers would become so overwhelming that no amount of bullets could stop them in time before they started their inevitable frenzy. We needed to plan for a solid wall to put between us and those freaks on the outside. But right now, we had neither the space nor the manpower to get it done. Instead, Jidka needed to expand further, and now that I knew that high-rise buildings were an architectural possibility, the thought of those becoming the future of Gurigii Badbaado was close to becoming a reality. If we could knock down a few of these old and crumbling shacks and houses, and replace them with strong buildings and strong foundations, then we could truly maximise the use of the limited space we had available, and bring with it both efficiency and tailor-made luxury to those who wanted to be here. The thought of a walled-in bastion with searchlights on every corner, 100 guns pointed any which way the threat came from, could go from the works of a dystopian comic book to an oddly comforting reality. The ability for every man and woman to go to sleep with a full belly every night, far away from the sounds of screaming and gunfire, and wake up to a clean and safe living zone. If that's what I can achieve for Jidka, then I know they'll pick the right man to make this happen. Then, and only then, would I personally rejoice, knowing my work is done. But I couldn't shake that feeling that the brighter Jidka shone, the more the dark horrors out there would start to notice us. But until that point, my work would never be complete, and the next port of call here and now was to get us a source of fuel. With unrefined grain piling up, unused in sacks in the warehouse, I ordered the research crews to look into ways we can turn this into clean, renewable fuel in-house. If we were going to continue travelling long distance, we would need this fuel. Not to mention that there was a growing need for fueling our cookhouses, and grain served no purpose sat on the shelf. But no matter our advancements, there was one thing we were never going to escape from.
There are some infected around here. A swarm is nearby! Man the stations!
And that, indeed, was the promise of being tested, mentally and physically, every single night. This, after all, was another melancholy milestone in our survival journey. 15 swarms, and undoubtedly 15 more to come in the days ahead. But I do wonder, would the swarms ever end? Would we ever be able to slaughter every last infected that roams this country or this planet? Could one single infection-free zone like ours really hold out forever? I mean, we had to, for the good of humankind. It was up to me to make sure that that wasn't just a dream for a cheap work of fiction. Everyone here deserves to live and sleep in peace, and I assure you, while I draw breath, I would push to make that very ethos a reality. I let that quiet sense of determination swirl around me for a moment, until the sound of my radio brings me out of my moment of thought, as the sender urges for a response.
Dr. Miller speaking. I have wonderful news. We are on the verge of a breakthrough in vaccine creation.
What do you mean by breakthrough?
It's too early to get your hopes up, but we're getting close to the end of our research. There's just one last thing we need.
What is it?
We have to start running tests on people. We need volunteers.
How many do you need?
8 people should suffice, but we might need more later.
You put it this way. All right,
Raiders are coming.
we'll think of
Get ready.
somebody.
8 people. Medical trials. Like many things up until now, I didn't want to admit it, but it was likely that some of our volunteers wouldn't survive. We weren't talking about fighting a common cold, let's face it. I decreed then and there that the only people I was going to send were those who knew the risks and volunteered entirely of their own volition. I couldn't force that in good conscience. Dr. Miller's requests were going to be the bane of my existence.
Boss, first.
Ask him to join us.
See, I knew hunger was a problem, but it was going to be a dark day if I started turning away survivors with honest intentions and no infection, so they're accepted into Jidka. Furthermore, the squad at the laboratory had scavenged a new car, so I ordered them to leave the old and return with the new. We needed every gun hand at home if we were going to put 8 people in Dr. Miller's hands. I hadn't even broached the idea of asking for volunteers yet. I kept writing the words down, only to rub them out, over and over again, unable to find a way of saying it that felt appropriate for its weight. And for men and women who had fought for me, seen their fellow new dervish die alongside them, stared down hordes of monsters, and shot down armed raiders for the zone, I felt that minimising the risks of what I was asking them to do would be the ultimate betrayal. But right after I set the researchers onto a biofuel endeavour, I knew I had to ask that question. I made the risk clear. I told them what might happen if they went through with it. I also mentioned to them the potential benefit, that this could mean the eradication of the infected for future generations to come, and assuring the continued survival of not only Mogadishu, but the rest of the world, whatever remained of it anyway. I imagine my face was a picture when every single one of them volunteered to take part, as willingly as they were to go toe-to-toe with the alphas and drag corpses off the roads. None of them feared death. I should have figured, really. They'd proven they'd lay down their lives every night for this zone, and this was no different. Once again, I find myself jealous of the resolve these troops had. But now, it was time to pick the 2 teams to go. But there was no doubt about one thing. I needed the assault rifles at home. Taking 8 men out of my defensive line was a risk in and of itself, especially with the prospect of those squads never returning back. So I armed them up with pistols, and I told them to stop for nobody on the way to the laboratory, to fire their weapons only to stay alive, and nothing more. I hoped, with any luck, that it would be a straight drive to Dr. Miller's facility, and then for them a straight drive right back once their work was concluded. That would be in a perfect world. Once again, the zone's numbers dropped, from 40 soldiers to 32. With the AK-47 still in Jidka, I was confident that we could hold the line with careful positioning. Nevertheless, this was one hell of a gamble, like rolling a dice with 6 sides, and 4 of them being 1. But these trials would take time, and for now there would be little that I could do but keep the zone standing strong for their return. And that was that. The teams were gone, and those weakened defences about to be tested immediately.
There are some infected around here. Receiving. Another one incoming!
Won't click longer.
Fort, spotted!
They're breaking into our building.
Receiving. Roger. Let's do it. On my way. We're on the move. Going there.
And despite the reduced numbers within the zone, The sheer number of barrels that we could get pointed at that entranceway and the focused fire brought down the entirety of the swarm surprisingly quickly. With 20 AK-47s pointed right at that Alpha, even he couldn't exactly shrug off that much lead in one place, and he's brought down harmlessly before he got anywhere near the zone. Honestly, I couldn't have asked for a cleaner fight, and I was very grateful for it. And come the morning, when the inevitable, miserable clean-up operation begins again, our food supply was good. Good, but not excellent. And excellent was where I wanted it to be. When the fresh meat, bread and soup ran out, I wanted to make sure there was a backup plan. So another mass scavenging run is ordered to give us an emergency stockpile. Though, just as I was thinking this might be quite a drawn-out affair, I hear this.
Chief, we've just found a shitload of supplies. Some prepper must have lived here. They piled up enough to survive the apocalypse. God bless these preppers.
That's great news.
Enemy group
Take it
approaching!
off.
And that was the definition of one man's trash becoming another man's treasure. Months of preparing for the end of the world, only to die in it. Awfully poetic and awfully tragic in equal measures. It might not have served the prepper very well, but it most certainly will for us. Though why this person exactly needed 3 AK-47s for themselves, 10 sacks of grain, half a dozen jerry cans, and a whole bunch of other items, will be a question lost to the ages. Nevertheless, it's irrelevant, as I order the whole lot to be seized and brought back to HQ. That there would be enough firepower for another squad all on its own. Watching it all come back, crate by crate, was quite the sight. To think that house was on Jidka's doorstep this whole time was quite iconic. No doubt, this would bolster our chances of turning Jidka into a fortress. But before I can let that image sink in, a call from another scavenging team reaches me with what I consider to be quite a comical tale this time.
On my way. Building clear. Ready for action. Going there. Search done. Let's do it. We're on the move. Search done. Let's do it. Roger. Receiving. On my way. Ready for action.
And here I was, thinking that the raiders were growing smarter. Don't get me wrong, it was still a senseless waste of life. But to lose said lives in such a ridiculous way made me wonder what really went through their heads. Regardless, however, I ordered the squad right back to duty. We needed that emergency stockpile for the citizens. I would not have another day running the kitchens on tenterhooks and good wishes. We needed to provide assurances that no matter what happens, there would always be a good, nutritious meal waiting on every citizen's table after their day of toil, whether that was in the cookhouse or the fields. Only then would I consider this problem to be solved. And with carloads of canned foods flowing in through the day, I knew it wouldn't be long before we had this issue under control at last. But where our fortunes are up, there was always a threat to keep an eye on.
They're trying to get inside.
Let's do it. Roger. On my way. Let's do it. We're on the move. We're on the move. There's nothing left.
I suppose really that I should be grateful for that. It wasn't one of the swarms that we'd become grimly accustomed to over the last while, but putting this distraction to one side for the time being, we did have cause for celebration within the zone right at this moment in time, and that was the completion of the first high-rise building in Gurigii, a building that I had decided to name Gurigii Badbaado, or, in Somali, the House of Survival. I initially had the thoughts of turning it into a fully residential building, but I found myself having dreams of grandeur that, truth be told, I had no real business entertaining. I fixate myself on 8 floors of industrial use, just picturing it. 60 people creating enough fuel to form an entire Somalian space program, or perhaps 60 people making high-quality armour in a supercharged blast furnace that made our current one look like nothing. Or maybe even a weapons factory that could churn out enough bullets to wage a small war or create an AK-47 in minutes. I couldn't deny that a building of this size could have much more use than just a simple housing block. But this would be a huge investment, and huge investments needed time to reflect and decide. I needed to stop thinking this way, because at the end of the day, when it's all boiled down to the elements of survival, shelter and safety for my citizens came before anything else, and to decide otherwise would be a betrayal of my duty. That was a duty that I was not going to breach anytime soon. With Gurigii Badbaado effectively a proof of concept on construction within Gurigii, I commissioned another building, more humble, better suited to the more graceful expansion of Gurigii Badbaado, this time with some intention. Tailor-made homes would always be superior to forcing an old shop into pretending it's something that it is simply not. Despite my fears over the escalating hordes and losing my men to these vaccine trials, we had plenty to be proud of, actually. I'd put money on the prospect that very few of the other infection-free zones had been able to build up to what we had so far. And we had nearly 250 crates of food now piled up in storage. Even if we were running a deficit each day, this would still keep our zone fed for weeks on end before we needed to replenish it. We were no longer held hostage by just simply a few coughs and sneezes in the kitchens, and we could afford to let those chefs recover properly when they did fall ill. All things considered, and given the state of the world since the downfall, I dare to say that things were starting to look up, despite the problems I was still determined to address. Problems that I admit, which are slightly easier to address after the merchant brings along an additional AK-47. That made 4 total spares now, another fully equipped defensive squad, all in the making right there. And with that in stock, I make it our new goal to end our reliance on scavenging and trading to satisfy our ever-growing weapons needs. It was time to put all of that spare metal to good use. With a new sense of determination, I tasked the researchers with the job of developing our own methods of crafting firearms. I just didn't want to scavenge relics from Mogadishu's corpses anymore. I wanted to manufacture them by hand. If we could build our own killing machines at will, our resilience would grow, as would the ranks of our new Daroish. And to find out whether Gurigii achieves this in the end, you'll have to tune into episode 6 of this Mogadishu playthrough. If you made it this far into the video, I would be grateful if you could like it and subscribe. This helps me out greatly. Make sure to hit that notification bell too, and you'll always be the first to know what happens next. Until then, stay safe, stay sharp, and stay tuned for episode 6.